Have you ever heard of a war started over some pastries? It sounds like a joke, right? But I assure you, it's a real, and frankly, a completely wild chapter in history. Today, we're diving into the story of the Pastry War, a conflict that saw France blockade and invade Mexico, all because of a ransacked bakery. So, set the scene. It's the 1830s. Mexico has recently won its independence from Spain, but the decades that followed were anything but peaceful. The new nation was politically unstable, with frequent coups, riots, and civil unrest. It was a chaotic time, and foreign nationals living in Mexico often found their businesses caught in the crossfire, suffering damages and losses during the turmoil. Now, enter our main character, a French pastry chef named Monsieur Remontel. He owned a small, popular bakery in the Tacubaya district of Mexico City. One day in 1828, during one of the many military coups, some rowdy Mexican army officers allegedly broke into his shop. Accounts differ on what exactly happened, but the story goes that they helped themselves to all his delicious pastries, maybe got a little drunk, and trashed the place, all without paying a single peso. Monsieur Remontel was, understandably, furious. His livelihood was ruined. He repeatedly appealed to the Mexican government for compensation, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The government was broke, disorganized, and frankly, had bigger problems to deal with than one baker's ruined shop. But Remontel was persistent. He wasn't just going to let this go. Frustrated and getting nowhere, Remontel decided to take his complaint to the highest authority he could think of, his home country, France. He, along with other French nationals who had suffered property damage in Mexico, petitioned the French government for help. Now, you might think, okay, a destroyed bakery is bad, but is it an international incident? Well, in the 19th century, things were a bit different. France, under King Louis Philippe, was looking to expand its influence and was inch shy about using gunboat diplomacy to get what it wanted. The king saw an opportunity. This wasn't just about pastries anymore. It was about national pride, economic interests, and sending a message. France had other grievances with Mexico, including unpaid loans and trade disputes. Monsieur Remontel's pastry problem became the perfect, almost comically simple, symbol for all of France's complaints. It was a relatable story that could rally public support back home. So, the French government compiled all the claims from its citizens, with Remontel's trashed bakery being the most famous one. They presented the Mexican government with a bill for a staggering 600,000 pesos. To put that in perspective, Monsieur Remontel's personal claim was for 60,000 pesos for his pastries, an astronomically high amount for baked goods at the time. This massive sum is why the conflict earned its nickname, the Pastry War, or Guerra de los Pasteles in Spanish. Mexico, already in financial turmoil, looked at this demand and basically said, "You've got to be kidding me." They refused to pay. The amount was outrageous, and they felt it was an insult to their sovereignty. France's response was swift and severe. King Louis Philippe wasn't bluffing. In 1838, he sent a naval fleet under the command of Admiral Charles Baudin across the Atlantic. Their mission: to blockade all of Mexico's major Gulf Coast ports, especially the crucial port of Veracruz. This blockade was a huge deal. Veracruz was Mexico's main artery for international trade. By cutting it off, France was choking the Mexican economy. They seized merchant ships and brought commerce to a grinding halt. The message was clear: pay up, or your country will suffocate. For months, the blockade continued. Tensions escalated. The Mexican government, led by President Anastasio Bustamante, still refused to cave to what they saw as French bullying. They prepared their coastal defenses, particularly the formidable island fortress of San Juan de Ulua, which guarded the entrance to Veracruz harbor. They believed the fortress was impregnable. On November 27, 1838, Admiral Baudin decided to force the issue. The French warships, equipped with new, powerful cannons that fired explosive shells, opened fire on San Juan de Ulua. The Mexican defenders fought back bravely, but their older cannons and gunpowder were no match for the modern French artillery. The fortress, once thought to be invincible, was systematically battered into submission. After a few hours of intense bombardment, the Mexican forces surrendered the fort. With the fortress captured, French troops landed and occupied the city of Veracruz itself. The war had officially moved from a naval blockade to a full-blown invasion. But the Mexicans weren't going down without a fight. A charismatic and controversial figure reemerged on the scene, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. Yes, the same Santa Anna of the Alamo fame. He had been living in political exile on his ranch, but he saw this crisis as his moment to return to power and be the savior of Mexico. Santa Anna took command of the Mexican forces and launched a daring, if not entirely well-planned, counterattack to retake Veracruz. In the fierce fighting that followed, Santa Anna was severely wounded by French cannon fire. His left leg was so badly injured that it had to be amputated. Now, this is where the story gets even more bizarre. Santa Anna, ever the master of political theater, treated his lost leg as a holy relic of his patriotism. He had it buried with full military honors in a grand ceremony. He used his injury as a powerful symbol of his sacrifice for the nation, which helped propel him back to the presidency of Mexico. He literally rode back into power on the fame of his lost leg. Meanwhile, the war was becoming a stalemate. France controlled the coast, but they didn't have enough troops to march inland and conquer the country. Mexico was suffering economically, but refused to be defeated militarily. The conflict was dragging on, and other world powers, particularly Great Britain, were getting concerned. The British had significant trade interests in Mexico, and the French blockade was costing them money. So, Britain stepped in to mediate. With diplomatic pressure from the British, both sides were brought to the negotiating table. Finally, in March of 1839, a peace treaty was signed. What were the terms? Well, Mexico didn't get off easy. They agreed to pay the 600,000 pesos demanded by the French. So, in the end, France got its money. The French then withdrew their forces and ended the blockade. Monsieur Remontel, the pastry chef who started it all, we can only assume, eventually got his compensation. Though his name is cemented in history, he disappears from the records after the conflict began. The pastry war might seem like a small, almost comical footnote in history, but its consequences were significant. For Mexico, it was another humiliating episode that highlighted its internal weakness and vulnerability to foreign powers. It deepened the country's debt and political instability. For Santa Anna, it was a personal triumph that resurrected his political career for better or worse. And for France, it was a successful, if costly, exercise in 19th-century power politics. They demonstrated their military might and willingness to protect their economic interests abroad, no matter how small the initial pretext. It just goes to show you that sometimes, the strangest events can trigger major international conflicts. A dispute over pastries led to a naval blockade, a full-scale battle, an invasion, and even helped a one-legged general become president. You truly can't make this stuff up. History is often stranger, and sometimes more delicious than fiction. Thanks for sticking with me through this incredible historical tale. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the weird and wonderful corners of the past. Let me know in the comments what other bizarre historical events you'd like to hear about. See you next time.